Başlıyoruz. Then Quidditch through the ages diyoruz. Çağlar Boyu Quidditch. Kenilworthy Wisp yazmış. Bu da Snidget olan hayvanımız mı yoksa Snitch mi? Not sure. Hogwarts. Property of Library diyor. Okay diyoruz. Quidditch through the ages. Kenilworthy Wisp. Arthur A. Levine Books. An imprint of Scholastic Press. In association with Wizard Books. 129B Diagon Alley London diyor. Umarım yazılar kadar ufak değildir. Diyorum öyleydi diye hatırlıyorum. Şunu bir tık yakınlaştırsam oluyor sanırım. Ben şunu bir yakınlaştırma olayını halledip geliyorum. Şöyle fena olmadı sanki. Praise for Quidditch through the ages. Kenilworthy Wisp's painstaking research has uncovered a veritable treasure trove of hitherto unknown facts about the sport of warlocks. A fascinating read, but in the backshot other a history of magic. Wisp has produced a truly enjoyable book, Quidditch fans are sure to find it both instructive and entertaining. Editor Which Broomstick. The definitive work on the origins and history of Quidditch, highly recommended. Brutus Scrimger, author, The Beatles' Bible. Mr. Wisp shows a lot of promise. If he keeps up the good work, he may well find himself sharing a photo shoot with me one of these days. Gilderoy Lockhart, author Magical Me. Okay diyoruz. Bunu hiç beklemiyordum. Lockhart'ı duymayı, görmeyi. Would you anything it'll be a bestseller? Go on. I bet you. Ludovic Bugman, England and Wimborne West Beader falan. Bu da bizim Ludo Bugman. I read verse. The Skeeter Daily Prophet falan. Burada gülüyoruz. Text copyright 2001 by J.K. Rowling. Illustrations and hand lettering copyright 2001 by J.K. Rowling. All rights reserved. Published by Scholastic Press, a division of Scholastic Incorporation. Publisher since 1920. Scholastic Press and the Lantern logo are trademarks and or registered trademarks of Scholastic Incorporation. Harry Potter and all related characters, names, and related indices are trademarks of Warner Bros. Bölünmüşler lan herhalde. Scholastic Press ayrı bir şey. Harry Potter, Warner Bros. Ayrı. I have no idea. No part of this publication may be reproduced or stored in a retrieval system or transmitted in any form or by any means, electronic, mechanical, photocopying, recording, or otherwise, without written permission of the publisher. Bir gün başım iyi belaya girecek ama umarım girmez çünkü kötü bir niyetim yok. Tamam mı? For information regarding permissions, write to Scholastic Incorporation. Attention! Permissions Department, 555 Broadway, New York, NY, 10,012. Scholastic Incorporation has arranged for 20% of the retail sales price less taxes from the sale of this book to go to Comic Relief UK's Harry's Books Fund. J.K. Rowling is donating all royalties to which she will be entitled. The purchase of this book is not tax deductible. Comic Relief may be contacted at Comic Relief, 5th floor, Albert Embankment, London, SEI 77P, England, www.comicrelief.com. Comic Relief in the United Kingdom is not affiliated with the organization of the same name in the United States. ISBN 02439 to 3261 to 1. Library of Congress cataloging in publication data available. Valla manyak mısın, niye buraları okuyorsunuz falan diyorsunuz. Okuyorsun falan diyorsunuz belki. Ama buralardan böyle hoş detaylar toplama ihtimalimiz oluyor bazen. Onun için bakmakta etçük zararlar çok fazla yok bence. 2019, 18, 17, 16, 15, 14, 07, 08, 09. Mesela bu ne? Hani 10'dan 1'e kadar geriye sayanları var. 20'den 14'e kadar gitmiş. 14'ten 7'ye sıçramış. 7'den 8, 9'a çıkmış falan. Bunlar bir şey anlatıyor ama ne anlatıyor? Not sure. Belki bunu fark ederiz bir gün falan. Onun için bunları okumak güzel. Printed in the United States and bound in Mexico 23. Meksiko ne alaka mesela? Anlatabiliyor muyum? United States'e ne diye Meksika'ya kadar gittiniz ki falan. First hardcover box set edition September 2001. Kitap bayağı eski. About the author. Kenilworth Wisp is a renowned Quidditch expert and he says fanatic. He is the author of many Quidditch-related works, including The Wonder of Victon Wanderers, If Live Like a Madman, a biography of Dangerous Day, Lilie Verliyin, and Beating the Bludgers, a study of defensive strategies in Quidditch. Kenilworth Wisp divides his time between his home in Nottinghamshire and wherever Victon Wanderers are playing this week. His hobbies include backgammon, vegetarian cookery, and collecting vintage broomsticks. Okay diyoruz. Forward. Quidditch Through the Ages is one of the most popular titles in the Hogwarts School Library. Madame Pince, or librarian, tells me that it is pawed about, dribbled on, and generally maltreated nearly every day. Dumbledore'un ön sözü bu büyük ihtimal. A high compliment for any book. Anyone who plays or watches Quidditch regularly will relish Mr. Wisp's book, as do those of us interested in wider wizarding history. As we have developed the game of Quidditch, so it has developed us. Quidditch unites witches and wizards from all walks of life, bringing us together to share moments of exhilaration, triumph, and for those who support the Chudley Cannons, despair. Bu Chudley Cannons üstünden şey dediydi ya Snape'e, nasıl bu sezonu Chudley Cannons'ın kaybedeceği açık ve netse benim de öleceğim o kadar net falan tarzı bir şeyler dediydi falan. Chudley Cannons'tı sanırım bu dedi. Ron da Chudley Cannons mı dediydi şeyin sonunda, fantastik canavarların falan. Chudley Cannons'tı yanlış hatırlamıyorsam. Fenerbahçe gibi bir şey bu herhalde. Herkes seviyor ama hiç kazanamıyor falan. Ben de Fenerbahçeliyim sanırım da en son ağzımdan Fenerbahçe kelimesi çıkalı birkaç ay olmuş olabilir yani falan. Devam. It was with some difficulty, I must own, that I persuaded Madame Pince to part with one of her books so that it might be copied for wider consumption. Indeed, when I told her it was to be made available to muggles, she was rendered temporarily speechless and neither moved nor blinked for several minutes. When she came to herself, she was thoughtful enough to ask whether I had taken leave of my senses. I was pleased to reassure her on that point and went on to explain why I had taken this unprecedented decision. Muggle readers will need no introduction to the work of Comic Relief UK, which funnily enough has nothing to do with the American organization of the same name. Bakın aynı şeyi o açıklamışlardı yukarıdaki böyle kitabın detayları, ISBN, Cercut numarasını yazdığı yerde falan. Hani bazen böyle cidden orayı okuduğumuz için burada bir kere daha görünce böyle bir değişik hissediyoruz falan. Neyse devam. So I now repeat my explanation to Madame Pince for the benefit of witches and wizards who have purchased this book. Comic Relief UK uses laughter to fight poverty, injustice, and disaster. Widespread amusement is converted into large quantities of money, over $250 million since they started in 1985, which is the equivalent of over 174 million pounds or 34 million galleons. 34 dedi lan. 34, 174, 34, 68, 68'dir şu hesabı doğru düzgün yapayım. Ben bu hesabı yapıp geliyorum. Bir galyon kaç dolarmış ya da poundmış çözmek üzereyiz. Bekleyin. Yani bir galyon 7 küsür dolara denk geliyor falan. Bu durumda bir galyon 70 Türk lirası falan oluyor. Güzel, güzel diyoruz. Bir galyon, altın galyon. İyi lan ben daha fazla beklerdim ama açıkçası. Galyon böyle büyük bir para falan. Öyle devam. Everyone involved in getting this book to you, from the author to the publisher to the paper suppliers, printers, binders, and booksellers, and narrators, contributed their time, energy, and materials free or at a reduced cost. Benden bahsetmiyorum şu an. Free or at a reduced cost. Tamam, reduced cost yaptığım işi seviyorum ama yaptığım iş aynı zamanda free falan. Benden bahsediyor şu an, burada bir lanet falan varsa bir kere daha fantastik canavarlarda olduğu gibi bana gelmeyecek bu sefer. Free or at a reduced cost. That's me. Fucking hell. Making it possible for 20% of the retail sales price less taxes from the sale of this book to go to a fund set up in Harry Potter's name by Comic Relief UK. Tamam, okey. Ben de Türkiye'deki insanlara yardım ediyorum. Boktan İngilizce eğitim, öğretim sistemi. Ben 12 yıl ilkokul, ortaokul, lise, 8'ini İngilizce öğrenerek şeylerek geçirdim falan. Bu beni üçünden de F4 alıp yerime böyle paşa paşa oturmaktan kurtarmadım falan mesela. Öyle, tamam mı? Şu an tam kesinlikle lafım yok. Hindistan'daki cart yerlere yardım ediyorsanız falan, dünyada daha çok ihtiyacı olan neredeyse hiçbir yer yok oradaki olaylarda, ama Türkiye'deki insanların bir şeyleri doğru görmeye başlaması lazım. Ben de onu yapmaya çalışıyorum burada falan. Benim işim belki diğeri kadar aciliyeti yoksa bile kesinlikle çok önemli şeylere sebep olabilitesi yüksek bir seviyede. Bu açıdan bir bak yine gördüm. Thieves Curse. Bu sefer bana gelmiyor. Ben bunu kabul etmiyorum. Bana gelmiyor Thieves Curse. J.K. Rowling. And J.K. Rowling. This fund was designed specifically to help children in need throughout the world. Kur'an çarpsın, herkesin ihtiyacı var benim şu an yaptığım şu işe. Sadece insanlar belki biraz sıkıcı olabilir, eyvallah, onu reddetmiyorum. Ya da farkında değil insanlar, ama ihtiyaç var. İhtiyaç var. Throughout the world. Benim videolara ne bileyim İngilizceden başka dillerin altyazıları olsa benim Türkçe konuştuğum yerlere falan dünyadaki herkes ulaşabilir falan. Throughout the world. By buying this book, and I will advise you to buy it, because if you read it too long without handing over money, you will find yourself the object of a thief's curse. Yemezler güzelim. You too will be contributing to this magical mission. I will be deceiving my readers if I said that this explanation made Madame Pins happy about handing over a library book to muggles. She suggested several alternatives, such as telling the people from Comic Relief UK that the library had burned down, or simply pretending that I had dropped dead without leaving instructions. When I told her that on the whole I preferred my original plan, she reluctantly agreed to hand over the book. Though at the point when it came to let go of it, her nerve failed her and I was forced to prise her fingers individually from the spine. Şöyle elini açmış falan. Though I have removed the usual library book spells from this volume, I cannot promise that every trace has gone. Madame Pins has been known to add unusual jinxes to the books in her care. I myself doodled absent-mindedly on a copy of Theories of Transubstantial Transfiguration last year, and next moment found the book beating me fiercely about the head. Please be careful how you treat this book. Tertemiz bakıyoruz, ona kimsenin zarar vermeyeceği ihtimali yok. E-book çünkü kendisi. Do not rip out the pages. Do not drop it in the bath. I cannot promise that Madame Pins will not swoop down on you wherever you are and demand a heavy fine falan. Şurası biraz bir soğuk oldu sanki, camı kapatıp geliyorum. Devam. All that remains is for me to thank you for supporting Comic Relief UK and to beg muggles not to try playing Quidditch at home. It is, of course, an entirely fictional sport and nobody really plays it. May I also take this opportunity to wish Puddlemere United the best of luck next season falan. Bir önceki cümleyi tamamıyla reddediyor falan. Gülüyoruz. Benim daha demin güldüğüm gibi falan. Chapter 1'den diyoruz. The evolution of the flying broomstick. No spell yet devised enables wizards to fly unaided in human form. Are you kidding me? No spell yet devised enables wizards to fly unaided in human form. Demek ki bu kitap Ölüm Yadigarları'nın önce çıkmış ki bunu okuyanlar Ölüm Yadigarları'nda Voldemort uçtuğunu görünce motherfucking hell falan olmuşlar. Öyle, ben de şu an oldum. Those few animagi who transform into winged creatures may enjoy flight, but they are a rarity. The witch or wizard who finds him or herself transfigured into a bat may take to the air, but having a bat's brain, they are sure to forget where they want to go the moment they take flight. Böyle bir şey var mı lan cidden? Bu Yerdeniz büyücüsünde vardı ama yok. Skitter böceğe dönüşmüyor ki. Cayır cayır haber yapmaya falan devam ediyor diyoruz. Burada bir şeyler yanlış. Çok da düşünmeyeceğim üstüne. Ya da böyle sırf yazar broomstick'le uçmanın güzel bir şey olduğu vurgusunu yapabilmek için animegilere şu an hakaret ediyor biraz. Bence bu daha potansiyel. Levitation is commonplace, but our ancestors were not content with hovering 5 feet from the ground. They wanted more. They wanted to fly like birds, but without the inconvenience of growing feathers. We are so accustomed these days to the fact that every wizarding household in Britain owns at least one flying broomstick that we rarely stop to ask ourselves why. Why should the humble broom have become the one object legally allowed as a means of wizarding transport? Why did we in the West not adopt the carpet so beloved of our Eastern brethren? Why didn't we choose to produce flying barrels, flying armchairs, flying bathtubs? Why brooms? Flying bathtubs falan tertemiz olurmuş. Öyle jacuzzi'de oturuyorsunuz, uçuyor falan o sırada tertemiz. Shrewd enough to see that their muggle neighbors would seek to exploit their powers if they knew their full extent. Witches and wizards kept themselves to themselves long before the international statute of wizard and secrecy came into effect. If they were to keep a means of flight in their houses, it would necessarily be something discreet, something easy to hide. Bu açıdan süpürge oluyor. The broomstick was ideal for this purpose. It required no explanation, no excuse found by muggles. It was easily portable and inexpensive. Nevertheless, the first brooms bewitched for flying purposes had their drawbacks. Records show that witches and wizards in Europe were using flying broomsticks as early as AD 962. Bu milattan önce mi sonra mı? Önce sanırım diyeceğim, but not sure. A German illuminated manuscript of this period shows 3 warlocks dismounting from their brooms with looks of exquisite discomfort on their faces. Guthrie Lochrin, a Scottish wizard writing in 1107, AD diye özellikle deyince bence milattan önce oluyor. Bayağı eski bir tarih. Durum bu. Spoke of the splinter-filled buttocks and bulging piles it suffered after a short broom ride from Montrose to Arbroath. A medieval broomstick on display in the Museum of Quidditch in London gives us an insight into Lochrin's discomfort. See figure A. Anlayın, resimleri de var. Umarım resimleri düzgün yapmıştır. Ben kitabı çünkü EPUB'dan PDF'e çevirdim. Bakacağız. Ha, tamam. Tertemiz. Tamam. Şuna bakalım, buna biniyorlarmış. Bu çok rahatsız ediyormuş. Evet, bir yerden sonra o yapacağı uyuşukluğu böyle tahmin hayal edebildim rahat bir şekilde. Okey. Bu sorunu nasıl çözdünüz? Koltukvari şeyler koyuyorlar sanırım. Bakalım. A thick knotty handle of unvarnished ash with hazel twigs bound crudely to one end. It is neither comfortable nor aerodynamic. The charms placed upon it are similarly basic. It will only move forwards at one speed. It will go up, down, and stop. Ha, ileri gidemiyor falan lan. Yo, it will only move forwards at one speed. It will go up, down, and stop. Tamamen dümdüz gidiyor, hani şöyle geri gidemiyorsun mesela. En başta başladığın yere gitmek istiyorsan şöyle dönüp gelmen falan gerekiyor herhalde. Görüyorsunuz resmen. Ha, benim kalemim vardı gerçi de bu süpürgeye benziyor böyle. Şu fırçasıyla falan beraber. Jesus lan. Bayağı süpürgeye benziyor cidden. Okay diyoruz. As wizarding families in those days made their own brooms, there was enormous variation in the speed, comfort, and handling of the transport available to them. By the 12th century, however, wizards had learned to barter services so that a skilled maker of brooms could exchange them for the potions his neighbor might make better than himself. Once broomsticks became more comfortable, They were flown for pleasure rather than merely used as a means of getting from point A to point B. Okay diyoruz. Chapter 2. Ancient Broom Games. Broom sports emerged almost as soon as broomsticks were sufficiently advanced to allow flyers to turn corners and vary their speed and height. Early wizarding writings and paintings give us some idea of the games or ancestors played. Some of these no longer exist. Others have survived or evolved into the sports we know today. The celebrated annual broom race of Sweden dates from the 10th century. Flyers race from Kopparberg to Arjeplog, a distance of slightly over 300 miles. The course runs straight through a dragon reservation, and the vast silver trophy is shaped like a Swedish horse snout. Nowadays, this is an international event, and wizards of all nationalities congregate at Kopparberg to cheer the starters, then a parade to Arjeplog to congratulate the survivors. Örneğin diyoruz. The famous painting Günther der Gewalttätige ist der Gewinner. Günther the Violent is the winner, dated 1105, shows the ancient German game of Stich Stock. A 20-foot-high pole was topped with an inflated dragon bladder. One player on a broomstick had the job of protecting this bladder. Bu bizim bayağı şeye benziyor. Ama bladder dediği ejderha şeyi mi? İdrar kesesi falan. Okay. The bladder guardian was tied to the pole by a rope around his or her waist, so that he or she could not fly further than 10 feet away from it. The rest of the players will take it in turns to fly at the bladder and attempt to puncture it with the specially sharpened ends of their brooms. The bladder guardian was allowed to use his or her wand to repel these attacks. Tam bayağı uzak bir oyun Quidditch'ten. The game ended when the bladder was successfully punctured, or the bladder guardian had either succeeded in hexing all opponents out of the running or collapsed from exhaustion. Stock died out in the 14th century. In Ireland, the game of Jane flourished, the subject of many an Irish ballad. The legendary wizard Fingal the Fearless is alleged to have been an Jane champion. One by one, the players will take the dome or ball, actually the gallbladder of a goat, and speed through a series of burning barrels set high in the air on stilts. The dome was to be thrown through the final barrel. The player who succeeded in getting the dome through the last barrel in the fastest time without having caught fire on the way was the winner. Scotland was the birthplace of what is probably the most dangerous of all broom games, Crea of Kivan. The game features in a tragic Gaelic poem of the 11th century, the first verse of which says, in translation, the players assembled 12 fine hearty men. They strapped on their cauldrons, stood poised to fly. At the sound of the horn, they were swiftly airborne, but 10 of their number were fated to die. Aynen. Rus ruleti gibi bir şey bu herhalde. Crea of Kivan players each wore a cauldron strapped to the head. At the sound of the horn or drum, up to 100 charmed rocks and boulders that had been hovering 100 feet above the ground began to fall towards the earth. The Crea of Kivan players zoomed around trying to catch as many rocks as possible in their cauldrons. Considered by many Scottish wizards to be the supreme test of manliness and courage, Crea of Kivan enjoyed considerable popularity in the Middle Ages, despite the huge number of fatalities that resulted from it. The game was made illegal in 1762, and though Magnus Denthead MacDonald spearheaded a campaign for its reintroduction in the 1960s, the Ministry of Magic refused to lift the ban. Shunt bombs was popular in Devon, England. This was a crude form of jousting the sole aim being to knock as many other players as possible off their brooms. The last person remaining on their broom winning. Swyvenhodge began in Herefordshire, like Stitch Stark. This involved an inflated bladder, usually a pig's. Players sat backwards on their brooms and batted the bladder backwards and forwards across a hedge with the brush ends of their brooms. The first person to miss gave their opponent a point. First to reach 50 points was the winner. Swyvenhodge is still played in England, though it has never achieved much widespread popularity. Shunt Bombs survives only as a children's game. At Quidditch Marsh, however, a game had been created that would one day become the most popular in the wizarding world. İsmi de buradan da geliyormuş. Queer, garip, enteresan falan. Quidditch böyle sanki bir delik, çukur gibi bir şeydi yanlış hatırlamıyorsam. Enteresan çukur falan. Sonra ama gerçi o Snitch tamam şey diyecektim. Snitch'le Quidditch'ten geliyormuş falan tarzı bir şeyler düşünecektim ama Snidget'in o işte ayrı bir şey oldu. Snitch yakaladığımız şey Quidditch oyunun adı falan. O farkı şimdi fark edince Quidditch'ten çıkmış Quidditch diye. O U, E, E, R, o sesli harfleri, 3 sesli harf, bir sessiz harfi YouTube direkt UI yapmışlar onu. R'yi tamamıyla yok etmiş ama zaten normalde okumamaları lazım. Kuiya falan bu kelimenin telaffuzu olurdu bence. Özellikle İngiltere çevresinde falan diyoruz. Kui ben onu en başta şey diye düşünüyorum. Sanki bu kui İspanyolca'da öyle bir ek var falan. Ne bileyim Avrupa'dalar sonuçta. İspanya Avrupa'da, İngiltere Avrupa'da falan bir şekilde mesela acquaintance falan dediği bir kelime var. Orada da bir kui var falan. Hani bir şekilde o kui olduğunu düşünüyordum ben. Kui için kendi kafamdan ama anlıyoruz. Garip, enteresan olan kelime olan queer'dan kui çıkmış diyelim. Okay. Chapter 3. The game from Quidditch Marsh. We owe our knowledge of the rude beginnings of Quidditch to the writings of the witch Gertie Kettle, who lived on the edge of Quidditch Marsh in the 11th century. Fortunately for us, she kept a diary, now in the Museum of Quidditch in London. The excerpts below have been translated from the badly spelled Saxon of the original. Tuesday, hot. That lot from across the marsh have been at it again, playing a stupid game on their broomsticks. A big leather ball landed in my cabbages. I hacked the man who came for it. I like to see him fly with his knees on back the front, the great hairy hawk. Tuesday, wet, was out on the marsh picking nettles. Broomstick idiots playing again, watched for a bit from behind a rock. They got a new ball, throwing it to each other and trying to stick it in trees at either end of the marsh. Pointless rubbish. Tuesday, windy. Gwenna came for nettle tea, then invited me out for a treat. Ended up watching those numbskulls playing their game on the marsh. That big Scottish warlock from up the hills was there. Now they've got two big, heavy rocks flying around trying to knock them all off their brooms. Unfortunately, it didn't happen while I was watching. Gwenna told me she often played herself, went home in disgust. Gwenna Jones vardı, o da Holly Harpy'lerde ünlü bir oyuncuydu değil mi? İyice isimleri falan şey olmuşum, aşina olmuşum. Ona bir sevineyim dedim. Devam. These extracts reveal much more than Gertie Kettle could have guessed, quite apart from the fact that she only knew the name of one of the days of the week. Firstly, the ball that landed in her cabbage patch was made of leather, as is the modern quiffle. Naturally, the inflated bladder used in other broom games of the period would be difficult to throw accurately, particularly in windy conditions. Secondly, Gertie tells us that the men were trying to stick it in trees at either end of the marsh, apparently an early form of gold scoring. Thirdly, she gives us a glimpse of the forerunners of bludgers. It is immensely interesting that there was a big Scottish warlock present. Could he have been a Creoth-Kivan player? Was it his idea to bewitch heavy rocks to zoom dangerously around the pitch, inspired by the boulders used in his native game? Bu şey miydi o? Katılanların yarısının öldüğü oyundan bahsediyorlar şu an. Hatırlayamadım. Devam. We find no further mention of the sport played on Quidditch Marsh until a century later, when the wizard Goodwin Neven took up his quill to write to his Norwegian cousin Olaf. Nin lived in Yorkshire, which demonstrates the spread of the sport throughout Britain in the 100 years after Gertie Kettle first witnessed it. Nin's letter is deposited in the archives of the Norwegian Ministry of Magic. Dear Olaf, how are you? I am well, though. Hilda had got a touch of dragon pox. We enjoyed a spirited game of Quidditch, ismi değişmiş, last Saturday night. Though poor Gunhilda was not up to playing catcher, and we had to use Rudolph the blacksmith instead. The team from Italy played well, though. Was no match for us. Bir dakika. The team from Italy played well, though was no match for us. Böyle herhalde. For we had been practicing hard all month and scored 42 times. Radulf got a blunder in the head because old Uga wasn't quick enough with his club. Bludger da oradan gelmiş. O zaman blood kan, kanlayıcı, kan yapan. Bludger da oradan geliyor. Bunu da kesinlikle tahmin etmiyordum. Gerçek İngilizce bunları. Devam. The new scoring barrels worked well. 3 at each end on stilts. Ona from the inn gave us them. She let us have free meat all night because we won as well. Gunhilda was a bit angry I got back so late. I had to dug a couple of nasty jinxes, but I've got my fingers back now. I'm sending this with the best all I've got. Hope he makes it, your cousin Goodwin diyor. Aklıma şey geldi. Ben uçak savarda yürüyüş yapıyorum neredeyse her gün. Orada da böyle Quidditch praktisi yapan insanlar oluyor falan. Gerçekliğimin ne kadar böyle bir anla şey olduğunu tahmin edebiliyorsunuzdur. Onları görüyorum günlerdir. Şimdi böyle Quidditch hakkında bir kitap okuyoruz. Böyle işte bilmem kaç sene önceki ilk Quidditch şeylerini falan okuyoruz. Bir yandan şimdi bu kaydı aldıktan sonra yürüyüşe gideceğim tekrar. Antrenman yapıyorlarsa onları göreceğim falan. Şu an değişik modlardayım. Sonuç olarak diyoruz. Devam. Here we see how far the game has progressed in a century. Goodwin's wife was to have played catcher, probably the old term for chaser. The blunder, undoubtedly bludger, that hit Radulf the blacksmith should have been fended off by Uga, who was obviously playing beater, as he was carrying a club. The goals are no longer trees, but barrels on stilts. Ha şey değil. O bizim köpük üflediğimiz gibi değiller. Barrel'ları şöyle. Şunun barrel olduğunu düşün elimin. Şöyle bir şeyin üstüne koyuyorlar. Topu şöyle içine doğru atıyorlar herhalde. Basketbol gibi biraz. Şu an. Yanlış anlamadıysam. But barrels on stilts. Ya da barrel'ları şöyle koyuyorlar. Şu tarafını deliyorlar falan. Top buradan gelince buradan gidiyor falan. Bu da olabilir. Ya da içinde duruyor. Tutucu onu alıyor, atıyor birine, oyun tekrar başlıyor falan. Not sure. One crucial element in the game was still missing, however. The Golden Snitch. The Golden Snitch. Burada bir nokta var herhalde ama ben EPUB'dan PDF'e çevirince yok olmuş. Devam. The addition of the fourth Quidditch ball did not occur until the middle of the 13th century, and it came about in a curious manner. Diyoruz. Chapter 4, The Arrival of the Golden Snitch. From the early 1100s, snitch hunting had been popular among many witches and wizards. The Golden Snitch, see figure B. Bakalım nasıl bir tipi varmış. Hani buymuş. Tamam, o zaman kitabın başındaki resim direkt bildiğimiz Snitch. Enteresan diyoruz. Figür B. Hemen geliyorum. Devam. Is today a protected species, but at that time golden snitches were common in Northern Europe. though difficult to detect by muggles because of their aptitude at hiding and their very great speed. The diminutive size of the Snidget, coupled with its remarkable agility in the air and talent at avoiding predators, merely added to the prestige of wizards who caught them. A 12th century tapestry preserved in the Museum of Quidditch shows a group setting out to catch a Snidget. In the first portion of the tapestry, some hunters carry nets. Others use wands, and still others attempt to catch the Snidget with their bare hands. The tapestry reveals the fact that the Snidget was often crushed by its captor. In the final portion of the tapestry, we see the wizard who caught the Snidget being presented with a bag of gold. Snidget hunting was reprehensible in many ways. Every right-minded wizard must applaud the destruction of these peace-loving little birds in the name of sport. Moreover, snitch hunting, which was usually undertaken in broad daylight, led to more muggle broomstick sightings than any other pursuit. The Wizards' Council of the time, however, was unable to curb the sport's popularity. Indeed, it appears that the council itself saw little wrong with it, as we shall see. Snitch hunting finally crossed paths with Quidditch in 1269 at a game attended by the chief of the Wizards' Council himself, Barbarius Breach. We know this because of the eyewitness account sent by Madame Modesty Rabnod of Kent to her sister Prudence in Aberdeen. This letter is also on display in the Museum of Quidditch. Okay, burada ben bir durayım. Yeni kayda geçelim, olmadı diyecek bir şey var mıdır? Devam. According to Madame Rabnod, Bragg brought a caged Snidget to the match and told the assembled players that he would award 150 galleons, not equivalent to over 1 million galleons today. Whether Chief Bragg intended to pay or not is a moot point. Equivalent to over 1 million galleons today. Galyon da değer kaybetmiş falan. Aneyn diyoruz. O dönemde bayağı değerliymiş çünkü büyük ihtimalle galyonları direkt saf altından falan yapıyorlardı. Devam. To the player who caught it during the course of that game, Madame Rabnod explained what happened next. The players rose as one into the air, ignoring the quaffle and dodging the blooders. But keepers abandoned the gold baskets and joined the hunt. The poor little Snidget showed up and down the pitch seeking a means of escape. But the wizards in the crowd forced it back with repelling spells. Well, Prue, you know how I am about snitch hunting and what I get like when my temper goes. I ran onto the pitch and screamed, Chief Bragg, this is not sport. Let the Snidget go free and let us watch the noble game of Quidditch. Bu sefer adı böyleymiş. Şiveden dolayı mı böyle yoksa bir de buna mı evrildi falan. Şiveden dolayı böyle bence. Which we have all come to see. If you believe me, Prue, all the brute did was laugh and throw the empty bird cage at me. Well, I saw red, Prue. I really did. Sinirlenmiş bayağı. And the poor little Snidget flew my way. I did summoning charm. You know how good my summoning charms are, Prue. Of course, it was easier for me to aim properly, not being mounted on a broomstick at that time. The little bird came zooming into my hand. I stuck it down the front of my robes and ran like fury. Well, they caught me, but not before I got out of the crowd and released the Snidget. Chief Bragg was very angry, and for a moment I thought I'd end up a horned toad or worse, but luckily his advisors calmed him down, and I was only fined 10 galleons for disrupting the game. Of course, I've never had 10 galleons in my life, so that's the old home gone. I'll be coming to live with you shortly. Luckily, they didn't take the hippogriff. And I'll tell you this, Prue, Chief Bragg would have lost my vote if I'd had one. Your loving sister, Modesty diyor. Hani kadınmış lan falan olduk. Bir an hep böyle oğlan diye şey ettiydim. Devam. Madame Rabnod's brave action might have saved one Snidget, but she could not save them all. Chief Bragg's idea had forever changed the nature of Quidditch. Golden Snitches were soon being released during all Quidditch games. One player on each team, the hunter. The seeker değil, the hunter. The seeker oluyor hayvan yasaklandığı zaman falan. Gerçek İngilizce diyoruz. Having the sole task of catching it. When the bird was killed, the game was over and the hunter's team was awarded an extra 150 points. Bu da şeyden geliyor. Ben size 150 galyon vereceğim falan dediydi o chief. Görüyorsunuz değil mi lan? Enteresan diyoruz. In memory of the 150 galleons promised by Chief Bragg yazıyormuş. Vallahi bilmiyordum yazdığını. The crowd undertook to keep the snidget on the pitch by using the repelling spells mentioned by Madame Rebnot. By the middle of the following century, however, Golden Snitch numbers had fallen so low that the Wizards' Council, now headed by the considerably more enlightened Affida Clegg, made the Golden Snitch a protected species, outlawing both its killing and its use in Quidditch games. The modesty Rebnot Snidget Reservation was founded in Somerset, and a substitute for the bird was frantically sought to enable the game of Quidditch to proceed. The invention of the Golden Snitch is credited to the wizard Bowman Wright of Godric's Hollow. Okay. While Quidditch teams all over the country tried to find bird substitutes for the Snidget, Wright, who was a skilled medal charmer, set himself to the task of creating a ball that mimicked the behavior and flight patterns of the Snidget. That he succeeded perfectly is clear from the many rolls of parchment he left behind him on his death, now in the possession of a private collector, listing the orders that he had received from all over the country. The Golden Snitch, as Bowman called his invention, was a walnut-sized ball exactly the weight of a Snidget. Its silvery wings had rotational joints like the Snidget's, enabling it to change direction with the lightning speed and precision of its living model. Burada bu ne diyordu? Rotational joint dediği şey şu bence. Şu bir kanat olsa, kanat böyle falan. Hani şu kanadı şöyle yapabilmesi, yani şöyle de kanat çırpabiliyor, şöyle de kanat çırpabiliyor falan. Rotational joint dediği olay bu bence. Enabling it to change direction with the lightning speed and precision of its living model. Devam. Unlike the Snidget, however, the Snitch had been bewitched to remain within the boundaries of the field. The introduction of the Golden Snitch may be said to have finished the process begun 300 years before on Quidditch Marsh. Quidditch had been really born. Diyoruz. Okay, chapter 5. Anti-Muggle precautions. In 1398, the wizard Zacharias Mums set down the first full description of the game of Quidditch. He began by emphasizing the need for anti-Muggle security while playing the game. Choose areas of deserted moorland, far from Muggle habitations, and make sure that you cannot be seen once you take off on your brooms. Muggle repelling charms are useful if you are setting up a permanent pitch. It is advisable too to play at night. We deduce that Mums's excellent advice was not always followed from the fact that the Wizards' Council outlawed all Quidditch playing within 50 miles of towns in 1362. Clearly, the popularity of the game was increasing rapidly, for the Council found it necessary to amend the ban in 1368. Making it illegal to play within 100 miles of a town. In 1419, the council issued the famously worded decree that Quidditch should not be played anywhere near any place where there is the slightest chance that a Muggle might be watching, or we'll see how well you can play with chained to a dungeon wall. As every school-age wizard knows, the fact that we fly on broomsticks is probably our worst-kept secret. No Muggle illustration of a witch is complete without a broom, and however ludicrous these drawings are, for none of the broomsticks depicted by Muggles could stay up in the air for a moment. They remind us that we were careless for too many centuries to be surprised that broomsticks and magic are inextricably linked in the Muggle mind. Bu güzel bir nokta olmuş şu açıdan. Hani böyle biz büyücü, cadı, caçuk değilse aklımıza direkt böyle süpürgeler geliyor. Özellikle Batı'da falan öyle. Hani böyle Batı'daki çıkan çizgi filmleri izleyerek büyümüş bir nesil olarak belki de bundan dolayı benim için de çok bariz gibi geliyor. Benim burada hoşuma giden nokta hani bu direkt süpürgenin bir büyülü obje olma ön kabulünün gelişini Harry Potter dünyasındaki büyücülerin Quidditch oynamaya bayılmasına dayandırılması. Böyle o bir sebebin kuvvetliliği, diğeri orada diğer tarafta da bir spor var. O sporu çok seviyor o dönemdeki insanlar falan. Hani böyle iki tarafa da olan vurgu paralel. Sanırım böyle bir şey demeye çalışıyordum. Bu hoşuma gitti yani. Okay, devam. Adequate security measures were not enforced until the International Statute of Wizarding Secrecy of 1692 made every Ministry of Magic directly responsible for the consequences of magical sports played within their territories. This subsequently led in Britain to the formation of the Department of Magical Games and Sports, which teams that floated the ministry guidelines were henceforth forced to disband. The most famous instance of this was the Bantry Bangers, a Scottish team renowned not only for their poor Quidditch skills, but also for their post-match parties. After their 1814 match against the Appleby Arrows, see Chapter 7, the Bangers not only allowed their bludgers to zoom away into the night, but also set out to capture a Hebridean black for their team mascot. Ministry of Magic representatives apprehended them as they were flying over Inverness, and the Bantry Bangers never played again. Nowadays, Quidditch teams do not play locally, but travel to pitches, which have been set up by the Department of Magical Games and Sports, where adequate anti-Muggle security is maintained. As Zacharias' mom so rightly suggested 600 years ago, Quidditch pitches are safest on deserted moors. Moor bu coğrafi bir şeydi ama ne olduğunu hatırlamıyorum. Bozkır diyor. Bozkır diyor. Okay. Chapter 6. Changes in Quidditch since the 14th century. Pitch. Zacharias' mom describes the 14th century pitch as oval-shaped, 500 feet long and 180 feet wide with a small central circle, approximately 2 feet in diameter. In the middle, Moms tells us that the referee or key judge is he or she was then known. Key judge diyorlarmış o zaman da key judge ama bizde referee'ye dönüştü bu artık. Snape's referee falan hatırlıyor ama felsefe taşındaki o lafları devam. Carried the four balls into this central circle while the 14 players stood around him. Around him dedi, him or her demedi falan. As he or she was then known. En başta o he or she diyerek hani kadın olma ihtimalini de belirttiği için bundan sonra him demeye devam edebilirim modunda olduğu için herhalde sadece him demeyi tercih ettiler. Devam. The moment the balls were released, the quaffle was thrown by the referee. See quaffle below. The players raced into the air. The goalposts in Mumps' time were still large baskets on poles, as seen in figure C. Bakalım neymiş şu? Ha, yine ikinci tahminim doğru olmuş falan. Top içeri giresi orada kalıyor falan. Neden o ağı da çıkarıp atmışlar? Not sure. Sonradan what we shall see diyelim. Eğer varsa of course. Bu durumda bir de artık bana ayrılan sürenin sonuna geldim. Bir durayım diyecek bir şey var mıdır? Nope. Hadi görüşürüz.